Fall is approaching and this is my favorite time of year, especially for creating DIY projects. And for this first one, I'm using a ceramic pumpkin that I got from Hobby Lobby. I love the lumpy, uneven surface of this pumpkin, but not the Hello Fall words engraved on it. I just personally don't love words on my decor, but if you like that, you can certainly leave it as is. I'm going to use joint compound to fill them in. I started out using a putty knife, but it was leaving behind a lot of additional joint compound, and I didn't want to have to sand this thing forever. So I wiped off the excess with a paper towel and then used my fingers to make sure the letters were all filled in, then set it aside to dry. Once it was dry, I sanded down the surface. I was actually kind of surprised at how well this had worked. I thought for sure you would still be able to see the letters. But sanding the surface took some of that existing finish off, so then I painted it with the color Drop Cloth by Dixie Belle. Now comes the tedious part. I found this beautiful fall napkin at Hobby Lobby as well, but I didn't want to just cover the surface with the whole thing. I think that would have caused a lot of wrinkles and be a little bit difficult to make it look nice. So I started to cut out the individual leaves. This way I could also arrange them how I wanted. To apply the leaves, I'm using my liquid patina from DIY Paint. I really like this stuff as a decoupage glue. It has a thin consistency and dries quickly. I like to use a small paintbrush and then add a thin layer of the liquid patina under the section I'm gluing down. Then use my paintbrush to push the napkin piece onto the pumpkin. I know this seems really tedious and time consuming, which it is, but the outcome is just so gorgeous. I ended up mixing in some Dollar Tree rub-on transfers as well to show you can get that same look with these. Once I was happy with how covered the pumpkin was, I painted the stem brown. I didn't want it to be just a flat brown though, so then I took my bronze gilding wax to highlight the ridges of the stem. You can also use rub and buff or even a metallic paint to get that same look. And that's it for this one. It is just absolutely stunning and looks so high-end for fall. For this project, I'm going to use my Cricut. Now, a Cricut is not necessary for this, so stick with me. If you can draw a leaf shape or have a leaf shape you can outline, you can use that. I wanted my leaf to look a specific way, and I'm not great at drawing, so I used my Cricut. It also doesn't matter what color vinyl you use. I was clearly not thinking during this step because I know vinyl doesn't stick to canvas. I've tried this before and it didn't work then either. So needless to say, I struggled here for a bit until I realized I should have used it as a reverse stencil instead of weeding it as if it were a decal. Eventually, I got the vinyl untangled and laid down. And all I'm using this for is to trace the outline of the leaf shape. I'm using a fine point micron pen to do this. Now that I have my leaf outline, I'm using a hot glue gun to once again trace that leaf shape. I want the image to be raised off of the surface of the canvas. I just took my time to do this and kept my hand moving. That way the glue would follow the line where I wanted it to and didn't puddle. I let the glue cool down so it got hard and then painted the entire canvas black. This color is Black Velvet by DIY Paint, and I like that it's a soft black and not too dark. Now for the fun part in bringing this piece to life, I'm going to use my gold leaf sheets to cover the leaf design and really make it pop. I use a specific metal leaf adhesive, but I've heard that you can use tacky glue. I keep meaning to try that method, but I haven't yet. I get my adhesive from Amazon and it's linked in my description box. I'm covering the entire surface of the leaf with the glue, and you want to be careful around the edges of the outline. I used a small paintbrush to make sure I didn't get the glue outside of the design. The gold leaf will stick anywhere that the glue touches. Once the leaf is covered with glue, set it aside to dry and become tacky for at least 30 minutes. Each adhesive has its own dry time, so just check what it says. Next, I'm taking my gold leaf sheets and I'm going to start laying them down on top of the tacky glue. I used my finger to rub the gold leaf down around the hot glue areas to make sure it was completely covered. Then I took any pieces hanging off of the design and not stuck down to the glue and placed them in areas where the gold leaf might have separated or cracked while pushing it down. I wanted to make sure the entire leaf surface is covered. And at this point, it's looking pretty messy. But then I rubbed my fingers around all the hot glue areas to make them pop out. Once the gold leaf is stuck down to all of the glued areas, I'm going to clean up all of the loose pieces with a soft, dry paintbrush. I wanted to make sure there was no gold leaf showing outside of the leaf design. There were a few little specks here and there, so I took a flat paintbrush and added a second coat of the black paint so it was nice and crisp. I thought I was going to stop here and be done, but wanted it to look a little more elevated and high-end. I picked up these balsa wood pieces from Hobby Lobby and going to use them to add a frame. This wood is super soft. You could even cut it with a sharp pair of scissors or miter shears, but I'm using my miter box. I wanted to stain the wood, but wasn't quite sure what color would look good, both with this type of wood and with the canvas design as well. So I took a scrap piece of the balsa wood to do some testing. I thought either the Special Walnut or Early American looked the best with the black and gold design. The others weren't quite right. I ended up choosing Special Walnut and stained all of the pieces before adding them to the canvas. I let the stain dry overnight and then hot glued them around the sides of the canvas. Now the balsa wood sticks out farther than the canvas, which I liked. I think it looks even more elevated and like a shadow box this way, but that's it for this one and I love it so much. This project is pretty easy. I picked up 3 of these glass candlestick holders and 2 glass vases that Dollar Tree has out all year long. Pro tip, use your heat gun or a hairdryer to easily remove stickers for no sticky residue left behind. I'm going to glue 2 of the candle holders together with the narrow top portion where you would put the candle facing each other. And I'm using E6000 glue. You do not want to use hot glue on glass unless you plan on taking your project apart. Hot glue does not stick to glass. You might get it to work temporarily, but it will easily peel right off. Anyways, for the 3rd candle holder, I'm taking one of the glass vases to glue on top of the narrow portion. And for the 2 candle holder piece, I glued the vase to the wide section. And this time I had to add the glue kind of inside of the lip or edge of the glass. The vase is circular while the bottom of the candle holder is an octagon. There will be areas where the glue and glass don't touch at all, but that's okay. I cleaned up any sections where the glue seeped to the outside. I didn't want it to dry with any lumps and then set it aside to dry overnight. So now I have 2 varying heights of candle holders. And I want to color the glass. Now I've done this a few times on my channel using both Mod Podge and school glue with food coloring and paint, swirling it around in the object. I've tried drying them in an oven and even letting them sit out to dry, but this time I'm trying something slightly different. I'm using gloss Mod Podge because I still want it to be shiny and look like glass. Then added in some food coloring. At first I made the mixture way too light. I wanted a specific deep green, but my final recipe was 4 drops of green, this one is leaf green, 3 drops of brown, and 3 drops of black. This food coloring set is listed in my Amazon favorites if you want the exact same colors. And to apply it this time, I'm painting the colored Mod Podge onto the glass surface. I've never tried this technique before, but I've seen other people do it. I love the way these turned out. I let them dry to see what the true color would be because the white of the Mod Podge always throws it off a bit until it dries. But like I said, the first coat I didn't add enough of the brown and black, so it turned out super light. It's still pretty, but not exactly what I was going for. I ended up mixing 3 separate batches until I was happy with the color and painted on 3 coats of the Mod Podge. So I'm not sure how the lighter colored coats would have affected the final result, but I'm sure they altered the outcome in some way. Now you can style these a few different ways. Simply add a candle into the vase, or add vase filler, or those water balls to make it look like objects are floating inside, or even add a lid on top to make them candy jars for Halloween. For this project, I'm making a pumpkin trio, which you can style individually or together. I'm going to show you all three before we look at the final reveal. For the first one, I picked up this giant wood pumpkin cutout from Hobby Lobby, and you can see here just how large it is in comparison to the Dollar Tree ones. And at 40% off, it is certainly worth it for the price. I'm going to whitewash the surface just so it blends in better with what we're going to do with it. My white paint was also starting to dry out, so I really needed to water it down. So I'm going to use more of the joint compound that I used earlier in this video. I saw a YouTuber named Angel Nicole do this in a recent video, and I thought it looked so cool. She did this on a circle, but I wanted to do a pumpkin. Anyways, you take the joint compound on a pointed palette knife and then spread it onto the surface of your project. And you want to keep doing this over and over, overlapping the lines, which will create a weave type of pattern. Typically on my channel, I just dive headfirst into all of my projects. Many of the things that I make are being done for the first time live on camera. There's no practicing ahead of time. But for this one, I really wanted to get the texture right, so I actually took a scrap piece of wood to make sure I understood the concept first. And I'm so glad I did, because look at how the left side compares to the right. It is so much better. So for the real thing, I wanted to color the joint compound so it had a more neutral beige color instead of the off-white. I mixed in some Apple Barrel acrylic paints in the color Warm Buff, Khaki, and Territorial Beige. Okay, so you're going to see the pumpkin is stained. That's because I had started adding the joint compound on and then realized my lines were super crooked. Instead of continuing down that path, I scraped it all off to start over. This time I drew a line down the center to follow it and keep it straight. I also learned that it worked best to build up a decent amount of the joint compound on the back of your palette knife, scrape the edges to keep it in that triangular shape. That helped keep the design looking uniform. You also want to start almost off of the object. I'm doing something different with the stem, so I started on the stem, then I can scrape off where I don't want it. But you need to start there to keep that full design. Then you just keep layering on the joint compound, one right on top of the previous section that you did. Now, once you get to the end of the first row, flip your project upside down. Then you create 2 rows, one on either side of the first row, so that they're going in the opposite direction. Again, this is going to create that weave-looking design. I let the joint compound dry overnight and then sanded up the edges to clean them up. For the stem, I'm taking my brown 2mm macrame and going to wrap it around the whole thing. I'm using my detail tip hot glue gun here since the macrame is so thin, I don't want the glue seeping out and looking like a mess. Now, before I show you it all staged, let's make the rest of this trio. The second one is super easy. I'm using a Dollar Tree pumpkin, and I drew a line about 3/4 of the way up. Then put a piece of painter's tape over that line. I'm going to stain the top section of the wood. I'm pretty sure I used the color Special Walnut, but I can't quite remember. I let the stain dry and then remove the tape, which is so satisfying. Then I'm taking some marble contact paper that I've had in my stash to cover the bottom portion of the pumpkin. I like to peel back the top of the paper backer just a little bit to get it started. That way the whole thing doesn't start sticking to my project before I have the top lined up nice and straight. Then I slowly start to peel off the backing while smoothing the contact paper down on top at the same time. And you'll notice I did not cut the paper to fit the shape perfectly. I left enough hanging off of the back, and I'll cut it a little bit closer once it's adhered to the wood. Then I cut slits all around the edges so I can wrap that contact paper over the sides. This is going to look more finished than if you didn't have the edges covered. Lastly for this one, I'm adding a strip of faux leather ribbon to cover where the contact paper ends. This ribbon will show every lump and bump under it, so if you use hot glue, you want to spread it out thin and not put too much on. Now for the last piece of this trio, I'm using another Dollar Tree cutout with the acorn. This thing was pretty warped and bends so easily since it is super thin, so be careful not to snap it right in half. I drew a line across the top where the cap of the acorn would be, and I'm going to stain the top of this one as well. I think I used English chestnut on this one since it's a little bit darker. And I didn't tape it off this time since the line is curved and the bottom is going to be covered. For the bottom portion of the acorn, I found this faux leather ribbon at Hobby Lobby, and this is actually what sparked the idea for this trio. It's funny how the simplest of things can cause my wheels to spin and come up with an idea like this. But the width of the ribbon was perfect. I wasn't able to wrap this one around the edges, but that's okay. I'll show you what we do there in a little bit. I blindly traced where the acorn cap turned and cut that portion off. Then I used hot glue to attach the leather to the acorn. I added the hot glue on section by section so it didn't cool down too much and show any lumps. I cut the excess off with an X-Acto knife to get nice and close to that edge. Now on the edges, since I couldn't wrap the leather, I took a black Sharpie and colored the edges all the way around. This detail probably isn't too noticeable in the end, but it's things like this that I think elevate your projects to make them look more high-end. Lastly for this one, to hide the seam of the leather, I'm adding these half-wood beads. I did leave a small space between the beads. This allows room for error if they don't fit perfectly across the section that you need, and it's harder to tell where there's a smaller or larger gap. And now my trio is complete. I love all of these individually and especially all together with the varying textures they each have. For this project, I'm making a fall-colored macrame wall hanging, and I'm adding it to this stick that I grabbed from my backyard. I scraped all the bark off and then bleached it to lighten the color a bit. But first I need to determine where the loop hanging portion is going to sit so I know how long the macrame cords need to be. I'm creating a spiral knot and didn't have a lot of the green cord left, so I decided to use a white cord as the inside part of the knot, since I have a lot of this color. But the length of my color cords is 240 inches or 610 centimeters, and the white cords are 130 inches or 330 centimeters. I'm adding 2 white cords to the branch with a lark's head knot, and then the green cord will go around the 2 white cords. I tape the branch down now so it doesn't move around on me. And like I said, I'm using one knot for this whole project. To make the spiral knot, first determine if you want the twist to go to the left or to the right. I wanted my twist to go to the right, so I'm going to start each knot on the left side. I'm taking the left green cord and making a triangle so the cord goes across the top of the white ones. Then the right cord is going to come over top of the straight section. Now that same right cord is going to go behind all the white cords and up through the triangle on the left. And then pull the green cords tight. I balled up my macrame because it was so long. This made it a little bit easier to work with. And then you repeat this until the spiral is as long as you want the shortest loop to be. Next, I need to attach the end of the spiral to the branch to create the loop. And I wanted it to mirror the first side with that lark's head knot. So to do this, take one of the white cords and wrap it around the branch and in between the loop. Then pull it to the right, wrapping it around itself. Then put the cord under the branch this time, leaving a loop. And the end of the cord will come down through the loop to create the knot. The difference here is you're only going to use 2 of the white cords on this end, and the other 2 will just hang down. I wasn't sure how to do the green ones just yet, so I moved on to my next color, and I'll show you shortly how I attach the colored cords on this end. The next color I'm using is tobacco, and I got these macrame cords at Hobby Lobby. I really like the single twist macrame that they have. Okay, so for the colored cords, I wrapped them around the branch on either end of the 2 white cords. Then I pulled them to make one spiral knot just to hold it in place. I'm not sure if that was the best way to do this, but it was all I could think of. If someone else does macrame and knows better how to do this, please let me know in the comments. The next color I'm using is brick and repeating that same process that we did with the other 2. Last color will be white. Here's how the wall hanging is looking so far, but I wanted the area where the cords hang down on the right to be a little bit fuller. So I cut some additional cords to just tie onto the existing ones. Next, I want to add 2 loop rows of beads. One row of beads will be a little bit larger than the other. The last part of this hanging is to add some macrame feathers for another element to the design. I'm going to cut down 20 pieces of the macrame to be 7 inches long and do that for all 3 colors. Creating the feather is easy. I'm starting with the green. So you want to grab 2 green cords that are hanging down and move the rest of the cords out of the way. Then lay a 7-inch cord looped in half on either side of the openings facing each other. One of the cords will go under the straight cords and up through the loop on the right, and the second is going to go on top and down through the loop on the left. Then pull those tight. And repeat that with all of the green cords, and then with the other 2 colors as well. Except for the next color, you want to start it a little bit further down so they end up being staggered. make the feather fluffy, you want to comb out the cords so they're no longer twisted together. Then using a rotary cutter, cut the macrame into a feather shape. I do this a few times, going back and forth, brushing out the macrame and shaping it with the rotary cutter until I like the way that it looks. Now, if you leave the feather like this, they tend to look a little floopy and sloppy once you hang it up on the wall. Macrame is a soft cord and wants to droop, so I picked up some of this Aleene's fabric stiffener spray to see if it would make the feathers hold their shape. I brushed the feathers out once more and then sprayed them. I let that dry and then I sprayed it again to make sure the macrame would hold its shape. And I did that on both sides of each feather. This was a long project, but I love the way it turned out. I'm debating whether or not I want to keep it for myself or list it for sale on my site. For this project, I have 2 different sizes of the 3D wreath forms from Dollar Tree, and it actually took me a little while to figure out how to put these things together. Even though it really is simple, but if anyone else has struggled like me, you want to use that silver piece they come with on the outside of the form, and then wrap the little tabs on each side of the spoke around the wreath ring. I found it easiest to do opposite sides and work my way around. And you want 1 silver piece on both ends of the 3D form. Next, I spray painted the metal white so it blends in better with the next step. And yes, I am using tub and tile spray paint because it was the only white that I had at the time and it sticks really well. When the paint dried, I'm taking some Dollar Tree macrame cord and I'm going to wrap it all around each spoke of the wreath form. I did this on both the large and the small one. Then, to make sure they would stand up and not topple over, I glued them down to a thin wood circle. Now, I want to make these look like pumpkins, so they need a stem. I'm going to use a brown paper lunch bag to create a stem for them. I cut the bottom off of the bag and then opened it up and added Mod Podge to start gluing it together. First, I glued it folded in half. Then I put another coat of the Mod Podge all over the bag, and I'm going to twist starting at the corner to make it look a little whimsical. At the end of the bag, I tore the paper a bit so I could then wrap it around the spokes, similar to how we did the silver discs at the beginning. I wanted to add some fairy lights to these to add to that whimsical style and add something a little extra. I needed 2 sets on the big one, and that didn't cover every spoke, but I didn't want all of them to have the lights anyways. And I used 1 pack for the small pumpkin. Then I just needed to decorate them. You don't see it here, but I added a piece of floral foam on top of the light batteries and then stuck my greenery and florals into that. Of course, we need to add some mini pumpkins in as well, and I wanted to try this technique that I saw on Pinterest. So I grabbed some mini pumpkins from Dollar Tree and I mixed up an orange toned paint. I didn't want the pumpkins as bright neon orange like they come. This color looks much more natural. So I wanted to give them that terracotta type of look, and I saw some people just flour over half wet paint to get that look. I thought these turned out so cool. I wanted to do this on some larger pumpkins, so I thought why not test it on these mini ones first, but I stuck them into the arrangement and that's it for this one.